board. Welcome, students. So today we're going to look at how we can arrange things on the screen using cascading styles. Particularly, we're going to look at using float, which is not really meant for this. If you have a look at the end of the notes that I've given you for today on the news, you'll see there's a couple of videos there that actually talk about other ways that we could arrange things on the screen that might make more sense to you, because using float, when we use float, we have to play around with the widths, and it can be a little bit of work. But today we're going to have a look at that anyways. Let's have a look at cascading style sheets with float. So the idea here, and I hope you can see this, somebody's going to mention to me if you can't. We're going to use block elements. Remember from last lesson, we have block elements and inline elements. We're going to float elements. Now, float is just a simple sort of command in CSS, which allows wrapping of things around an element. It can be, well, float was actually designed at the time when a lot of printed sort of material was being translated onto the web, and sort of printed material, a lot of it we do float word text around images, and so float was really designed to do that. But pretty soon people using CSS and HTML realized that with a little bit of tweaking you could do some other things with float, like organizing columns and rows and things like that. That wasn't its original purpose. You can do that. It's a little bit of work. There is something else that will make columns and rows easier. And if you're interested in that, have a look at the links that I put at the bottom of the news today. There's a couple of videos there that are quite short. The guys don't talk as long as I do, or as Hussam does. And you might find that kind of interesting. So the thing about preventing a container collapse, that is a point that we have to look out for using float. If we're going to use float, what we end up having is we have blocks sort of taking up space that is sort of crowding into other blocks, and that's what we're going to call a container collapse. That's part of what it does. Float is allow you to push things up beside things, and it can cause you a problem if you don't look out for it. We do have a solution for it, which is recommended by the person who made these notes, who is Mr. Hussam, who sits 2 doors down from me in the staff room. Did a great job in making these notes. But yeah, if you follow the notes and do the example, I want you guys to do the example that comes with the notes. So if you look at, so I mean, at the moment, we're just looking at the PowerPoint, right? But if you look on the news item that I posted today, you'll see that there's 2 videos. You should look at those videos and watch them carefully. You should watch them and stop them as you go, because I've also posted a link there to the example. And because the 2 videos, what happens there is actually Mr. Hussam, he actually goes through these notes like I'm going through, but he does it with these examples. And so I really think that you need to look at that video, because I could do that, but I thought he did such a great job that you guys can look at what he's done there. That's great. All right, so do you remember last lesson we talked about the difference between the block and inline elements, right? When we style blocks and inline elements. So, you know, your block is going to take up the whole width of the parent, whatever parent it's in, whereas inline will just take up as much as the size of its content. And so we talked about that, and that's important for when we're arranging things on a page. And so one of the things we can do is it's a lot easier to work with block. So one of the things we can do is we can convert things from inline to block, and we'll see to do that a bit later. If not here, at least in that video from Mr. Hussam. Maybe you're familiar that we do have some common block elements. For example, our header elements, our paragraph elements, list elements, etc. We also have common inline elements that you would be familiar with, maybe our image tag, our a tag, and these other ones, M, span. All of these we used, except you didn't use strong. Strong is not too fancy. I mean, it is two tags come together, and whatever text is in between them, it works with tags. Sorry, it works with text. And so that's why it's inline, because our text is inline. Strong is just going to make it bold. And likewise, EM. EM is more like italics. Span. The cool thing about span is it's just a general purpose tag. You can use that to style some text up. And so you can actually, yeah, of course, you can put inline styling in it. You could style it otherwise, but it's often used for that because maybe you only got one or two little tags, little bits of text that you want to style specially. We did that last week, right? It's in the, yeah, so no need to talk about that for a while. Now, coming back to this thing here, we were saying that block and inline are different. It's easier to work with block if we want to arrange things in the screen, you know, because with block, we're going to get a fixed sort of width thing going on. And so what we can do is we can convert some of these inline things like A, we convert it from displaying as inline to displaying as a block. And so that's one thing that we'll look at. Actually, if you please do watch the videos that Hussam's made. The second video, so he's got two videos. The first video is basically what I'm talking now, right? He goes through this, but he also gives some examples. The second video is he makes a web page for you. And so I've given you the starter files, and you can follow. I really encourage you to watch that one. Follow along with him and make the same web page. And then you'll be able to move all these different blocks into a nice organization on the page. So we could display nothing. I mean, you could have a bit of text in or image or whatever that's holding up some space in the web page, and you could turn its display to none. And so what that's going to do is it's going to, as it says, the element doesn't occupy the space in it. So if you display none, it's like the element disappeared. There's something similar, which is where you can use the command of visibility hidden, and it'll take up the space, but it'll just be blank space. So as opposed to sort of disappearing completely and not taking any space, the visibility it's there, but you can't see it. Now, of course, if you go and use the inspect, right? And so you guys saw the inspect last time in the developer tools. So that's always a good thing to sort of work with. Have a look at the inspect. With the inspect, you can go back and you see, oh, look, there's an element there, right? I mean, there's a bit of text, but I can't see it. That's because the display is turned to none, or else the visibility is turned to hidden. And so there's some other things. We can display things as tables, or we can display things as a list item. Now, okay, so you know about borders, I hope. Last lesson we talked about, you've got your block, and inside your block you've got contents, and then your contents, you're going to have around the contents some padding, then you're going to have a border, and then outside that you're going to have a margin. Okay, so that's all part of how these blocks work. We've got this other concept which is like that, which is called an outline, and how the outline works is that it's going to it's kind of like a border, and you can style it, but it doesn't sort of add to the size of the block, whereas your border is included in the size of the block. So if you set a black block to a certain size, the border is included in that. The outline is not. Right. So box sizing, you can use with the box sizing. You'll see that you can if you've got a box that's sort of taking up the whole width of the screen, you can sort of make it take up less of the screen, or you can make it fill as much as you need. All right, so that's what this is referring to here, right? So how are you trying to log in, student? So yeah, 1, 2, class 3, 4, exclamation mark, I think. Yeah. So for example, if you set the box width to 200 pixels, right? You've got two different ways of looking at this. If you set the box sizing of the border box to a certain size, you can have your 200 pixels includes the entire box, right? Otherwise, if you're using a content box, then the 200 pixels is not going to include any borders or padding. All right, so that's the difference between what we call a border box method or a content box, right? So content box, when we set the width, we're only talking about the inside of the box. So that can sort of cause you some problems. All right, so that's going to be in the display. So what you want to do is make sure that you set your display if you want as in a block as opposed to content. All right, so 3 different ways are mentioned here. There are more ways, but these are 3 different ways of working with your layout, working with the size of the individual sort of elements in your layout. You can have fixed, where you just use pixels or something like that. Fluid, we would have everything in sort of like percentages. So that would be percentages on one of the main elements that you're using. Or we could use M, which would be based on your font, you know, the first font that shows up. So these kind of all sort of the fluid layouts, what they're going to do is they're going to allow you to shrink or expand the screen, and things will still look proportional. Now, there's some other ways that we do this, and as it mentions there, responsive design, where we might have, you know, if it's a narrow screen, we might have just 1 column, and if it's a wide screen, we might have 3 or 4 columns. And if you guys did the 1436 class, you would have done that, right? And what we used with that is we used max and min widths along with our sort of fluid type things. And so that's what we would call this. So using a min and a max width, what will happen if you're using a percentage of width of 80%, for example, 80%, that means that whatever element it is that you're styling at 80%, it's going to take up 80% of the width of whatever it's inside of, whatever its parent is. So we look at the child and we look at the parent. All right, so this is going to take up 80% of the parent. When we set the min width and the max width, that means until it gets to this point, right? When it gets to that the width is only 780 pixels, then it won't get any smaller, right? And so when it gets to 1200 pixels, it won't get any bigger. And so we can maintain a particular type of layout. All right, now we get to the stuff that's happening today. That's sort of new, maybe. I don't know if it's new, but maybe. So I said new, maybe. We can use float in order to sort of arrange things on the screen so they work together. Now remember, float was not designed for you to make columns and stuff like that. What it was designed for is so that images could have text float around them. So instead of having an image and then a bunch of text underneath it, we could float the image to the left, and what would happen is the text would come around it. So that was the idea of the float. You could float it to the left or float it to the right, and the text would come around it, like you see in a book. Because typically in books, they don't have a picture and then there's words underneath, right? So what they were doing is that they were trying, when they introduced float, they were trying to reproduce what was happening in your text print. Going along with float is this command to clear. And so basically the problem is that when you set up a float, that's going to work with all of the elements that are sort of in that container. And maybe you don't want that to happen. Maybe you have other elements that follow it that you don't want to be affected by that command. And so you can clear it and basically start over again. Remember that your code is going to work in sequence, kind of like a computer program, right? And so you can do something at the top and then change it at the bottom, and so that it affects different elements as they're rendered. So the clear and the float, they both work with left, right, none, and both. Okay. So I'm sorry I don't have beautiful images to show you with this, but they are in the video that was made by Hussam. And if you follow that, you'll see that he actually gives you examples in this. I'm trying to make a short video and I'm pointing you to that to tell you what to do. And then you can take your time and sort of go along with that. So we talk about sibling. That sounds like a family, right? Siblings, parents, children, right? And so basically when you create your code, you can have elements within elements, and that's going to be a child. And so if you've got 3 or 4 elements inside a single element, well, they're going to be siblings because they're all child of the same parent. Okay, so the thing is that all of those childs, you can style them all together so they all stack up beside each other, or maybe you want to style some of them differently. So some stack up together in a column and some sit down the bottom, in which case you would float to the left, put 3 in there, make sure that they're the right width so that they can fit in, because you can only stack them up if their widths are all add up to less than 100%, right? Because once you get to 100% width, you got to go down to the next thing, right? And so you could have 2 or 3 of these, something less than 30% width, and then with a left float, and then the next one after that you could clear and let it sit on the bottom. You'd want to do that if you wanted to have a footer or something like that. Okay, so yeah. All right, so this is a warning and a danger. And so the diagram shows it kind of nicely. So what's happened is they floated all of these elements here and they're inside this container. But this container doesn't have, or hold on, actually there's 4 elements here. And the first element doesn't have any text in it. All right, so when we floated them all we floated them all, they all just sort of collapsed up the container of the first element. So the first element kind of disappeared. And so that's going to kind of look kind of bad. So what we can do is you can do this thing here. Now this is called a pseudo class. See the dot, okay, the 2 colons. And so basically what we're saying is after we've done whatever it is we're doing there with our float, what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of text content. It actually sort of adds to the text a little, so instead of being empty text, it's actually got some text in there. And then you're clearing the float and then display a table. And what will happen is you'll get something that looks like this instead. So instead of having this terrible collapsed container, which really looks bad, you can expand that container back out with this. And that brings me, so that was very short. I hope that's okay. Very full explanation of all of this in the video. You can use, so @media is a very good thing to mention, Taha. That's, if we use @media, we can choose between different, you could have an @media command and have 2 different links, because it can be like a if else kind of thing, right? You can say, okay, well, if the width is this much, then we're going to use this CSS. And if the width is that much, then we'll use that CSS. So we can do that. Yes, very nice. So @media is going to check the viewport. How big is the thing that we're working with? So I hope that you're going to find that an interesting exercise to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now go back to the home page on this. There it is. And let's see here. Back to the home page. Let's have a look. So what I want you to do, if you have a look at these 2 videos, now, the second video is 33 minutes long. The first video, he goes through what I just went through with a little bit more detail and giving examples. Okay, so I do recommend you look at it and take your time with it. The second video, though it's 33 minutes long, you'll probably spend more than that because he's going to show you how to do the example. And so you'll probably want to stop every little bit. Right? Now, along with that is a link to examples. When you press on that link, you should download a compressed folder. The compressed folder has starter for you to start to do the examples. Okay, there's two examples there, one which just has a bunch of columns and another one which is a nice web page about chocolates. All right, and so I think I got a Dropbox for that. Yeah, so I haven't put the link for the Dropbox. Now, at the bottom, it's not this is not part of the course, but just a quick Google search, pulled these up. They're short videos. I mean, one's 10 minutes long, one's 15, something like that. But what you'll find is they both explain to you a little bit of what I was trying to tell you, that Float was not really designed to do the stuff that we're doing with it, but it does, just because smart people were able to sort of hack it, really. You know what I mean? So pretty soon some smart people sort of hacked and say, hey, look with this, we can make, multiple columns, and, we can do all this kind of stuff with it. That's not what it was designed to do. But we do have some things that are designed to do that, which is this thing called a grid. So there's this other sort of way of doing it with Flex, and both grid are probably a little easier to work with than Float. So that's it, I mean, I'm just saying that to you to sort of lock that away in your memory vault somewhere. 2 years from now, when you're, I don't know, 6 months from now, 3 weeks from now, I don't know, when you're making your web pages, and this Float stuff's kind of fun, but I'm really getting tired of fixing all these widths, individually and all of that. Wow, I could use Flex, or I could use Grid. Just another way of doing it. Okay, so there's a couple more ways of doing it if you want to have a look. And the other thing it will do is it'll introduce you to these resources on YouTube. That I mean, if you got lots of hours, instead of playing Minecraft, you could sort of be watching videos on how to do CSS. There's a lot of great content out there. Okay, there's two things that I wanted you to get out of that. One, you could get lots of great content that'll tell you how to do your web stuff. I mean, it's a big deal, right? I mean, people are making money out of this. You know what I mean? It's not just, and it's nice to have a computer qualification. I don't know what qualifications these guys have. They might not even have a qualification, but they're probably making money out of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's nice to have a degree. It's also nice to know how to do stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. And so these guys know how to do stuff, don't you? Yeah, so download the examples. I will put the link up now. I'm going to